Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Artin. I make beats and sound design videos, and today we are going to finish up the series on the synth engines in the OPXY. There are 5 synth engines left to review, and let's jump right into it with Hardsync right here. Like all teenage engineering synths, it has 4 different parameters. The first one is frequency, which to me sounds like you have 2 oscillators and one of them is hard synced to the other. So when you switch the frequencies, you get a switch to the timbre and then also a switch to, I guess, the octave. This is what it sounds like. Next, we have sub, which basically makes everything fatter. Next, we have noise, which just adds some white noise to the sound. And finally, you have a high-pass filter. Now, if we are going to do some sound design, I might turn up the frequency a little bit. I definitely always love having the sub cranked up all the way. You get a nice and thick sound that way. Whereas without it, Hardsync to me sounds a little puny, but you know, you can mix it in as you see fit based on how much room you need in your track. I do like a little bit of noise, not too much, and I'm usually not touching the high pass filter because I don't really find a use for it too often. Now, in the ADSR envelope, we're just gonna leave it like this, where you have decent sustain and a little bit of attack. And on our filter, we're gonna do a low pass filter. I believe I'm using, state variable filter, which I think is 12 dB per octave. So it's a little more gentle when you turn up the resonance. We are gonna add a little bit of key tracking and a little bit of the envelope amount to that. And the filter envelope has this shape where there's no sustain, a little bit of attack, a little bit of decay, a little bit of release, but it's just gonna kind of like fade out. But we're not going too crazy, and it's only 12 dBs per octave, so we're not, losing too much. And this is where the magic happens, in my opinion. It's the LFO, and what I've done is I've used the value LFO here, which lets you map to any parameter on the former pages I just went through, and mapping to the frequency, turning this amount up and having some decent speed gives you like this cool chorusing widening effect. This is what it sounds like with it off. And then when we turn this on, it becomes much nicer. You're almost getting a free effect without having to do anything. I think that's pretty nice for chords. Now, if we turn this LFO off, change our filter up a little bit, maybe turn down the resonance, do it more low pass, turn off the envelope amount, turn off the key tracking, go back into our envelope, and let's do a nice plucky bass here. And we're just gonna do a very fast attack, a little bit of decay. We're gonna do something similar on the filter, and we might add some envelope back depending on how this goes. Let's open up this filter a little bit. So it can do a pretty good bass too, and that sub parameter is doing a lot of work here. And we can mess with some different filters, get a couple different flavors of this bass going if we want. For example, we turn down our frequency. This is a 24 dB per octave filter, and it does self-oscillate and becomes a little more wowy. We can even add some sustain if we want this to just be like nice and full. There's a lot you can do here. You can make plucky basses, you can make sustained basses, kind of whatever you prefer. All right, moving on. Aside from basses, you can also make horns with this thing. And if we do a very short decay, a little bit of release, a little bit of attack, maybe a little more. Let's turn down the wowiness of this. Less resonance. That's already sounding like some horns to me. Go into the filter. I'm going to make a similar shape to the amp envelope, but instead I'm going to have the attack come in right away. And if we were to add a little bit of reverb, you get horns. All right, next up, we got the organ. The organ has 4 different parameters. The first one is the type of organ, and it comes with, I believe, 8 different types of organs. And those are just different organ algorithms, which we'll go through. The second one adds or removes bass. And then these last 2 have to do with tremolo. One of them is the tremolo amount. The other is the tremolo speed. The organs themselves, they sound pretty good to me. So this is, when you have it down all the way, you got all the bass. When you turn it up, less bass. It's a good mixing tool. Now, the second one sounds like an FM organ to me. And you get like a fun little detune effect when you turn up the bass. Third one can get a little bright. We can mess with the tremolo too. So this is the speed. Third one is the amount. Move on to the 4th algorithm. Fairly mellow. Pretty bright. This one's even brighter than the one before. The second knob almost feels like a filter to me. When you have it down, you're supposed to have more bass. When you turn it up, you get more high frequencies in there. Can get the brightest. You don't just have to use this as an organ. You can easily make a bass with this. If we do a plucky amp envelope, do a similar thing in the filter, add a nice little low pass filter here. Now, if we turn this down, we don't really need tremolo. Nice and simple, plucky bass. And you can have different flavors of bass depending on the organ algorithm. You can also get weird with it if you map the value to the bass. And if we set this on the FM one, we can get some weirdness going on. Might even be fun to try this out on the random one. You can do a lot of fun little things with the arpeggiator if you want. All right, let's move on to the next synth, which is Prism. Prism is pretty simple. It sounds like it is a square wave all the way up, and then if you go all the way down, to me, it sounds a little bit more like a sawtooth. Now, ratio changes the ratio between the oscillators. It's really just changing the octave/pitch relationships. So this is the lowest. Then you have some detune. This is a little more subtle. It adds movement, it adds some width, but really the stereo knob is what's gonna make this wide. It's all the way down right now, which will be very mono. The sound's gonna be right down the middle. If we turn it up, it becomes a lot more wide. From a sound design perspective, I feel like there's definitely a lot you can do with the LFO here. Any one of these LFOs work well. I love using tremolo all the time because you get that vibrato and you get the tremolo effect. And there's a lot of fun stuff you can do. You can do risers if you want, if you have a very slow rate. And you can even change the shapes here and get different flavors. That's a lot of fun, but if you don't want to get into weird territory, you can throw a value on here, and any one of these parameters, I feel like shape and frequency are the most audible, but if you want, there's nothing stopping you from modulating detune or stereo, and it will sound decent. Here, we'll try some of these out. We'll try the shape. Let's do a sine wave, and you can hear what's going on. Let's maybe make it slower. Nice little evolving sound. Now if we change it to the ratio, you get it going through the octaves a little bit. It's an easy way to make your patch sound a lot more evolving. Obviously, there's stuff we can do with the filter here too. If we do the Z low pass, turn up our envelope amount all the way. Maybe a little bit of key tracking too. Have our filter maybe fade in. We can make like nice, fun, evolving pads if we want, or basses, or really anything. Prism can kind of do it all. It can do basses, it can do pads, it can do evolving texture things. If we add some reverb and some delay here, that's cool. All right, let's move on to simple. So square, saw, and you kind of morph in between. When you're on the sawtooth, pulse width doesn't really do anything. When you go into square territory, you can get some pulse width modulation going there. And it becomes more intense the more you go into the square territory. You got noise, then you got stereo width. Now simple, I think it's good for simple sounds. You can definitely do basses. Let's load up a filter here. We'll do the ladder filter. Let's do that. Let's make this a deeper sound in our filter envelope. I'm just gonna have it open up gradually. In our amp envelope, turn down the attack so it is a fast attack. And then if we want, we can open up the envelope even more. And now we can do fun things with the LFO. Value's a good one here. You can definitely use it on the shape. Probably will sound better with a sine. And you're getting like a little bit of, not necessarily pulse width modulation, but it's modulating between a square and a sawtooth. You could also map this to the pulse width, and now we are getting pulse width modulation. We can turn this up if we want, make it very noticeable. Fun times. We could also make pads with this if we just have the amp envelope fade in, so long attack, sustain's good, long release. On our filter envelope, we will have it fade in as well, do a long release as well, turn up this filter cutoff, maybe add a little bit more resonance, add some envelope, make sure we are in poly mode, you know, send a little bit to the effects. Reverb's great for pads. Turn off that LFO for a second. We can make this a darker pad if we turn down the filter cutoff. Then it kind of gradually fades in, the brightness does. But if we want, we can go into our filter envelope, turn down the sustain frequency. Have this fade in a little bit. A lot more mellow. There you go. It is nice and simple to use. It's good for, again, bread and butter sounds. Not really too much you're gonna be able to do from a sound design perspective with the synth parameters themselves, because, you know, noise and the stereo width are not the most exciting parameters to modulate. The pulse width and the shape, you know, you could do pulse width modulation. Sure, you can modulate between a sawtooth and a square. It's not going to sound that weird if you're looking to make weird sounds, which I enjoy doing. But this next synth, which is Wavetable, this thing is probably the most tuned for experimental sound design, because you can make so many weird sounds with this thing, and I'm going to show you. So you get 4 parameters like on everything. First, you can cycle through 9 different wavetables. The first knob just changes the wavetable. The second knob changes the position in whatever wavetable you're on, and if you move to another wavetable, you'll just end up on whatever position you were at. So we can see we end up on the 74th position of another wavetable as we cycle through. Now let's get a better envelope going here. Turn off our LFO and our filter. Now, this warp parameter, it's basically doing like pulse width modulation, but it does it for any shape you throw in here. You can just warp it. This last one, which is called drift. What drift does, it turns whatever wavetable you're on, whatever position, it kind of does FM to it. But when you turn it halfway up, you're doing FM. When you turn it up all the way, you just get a whole different sound. This is all the way down. It's richer. You get more brightness to the sound, more harmonics. And at lower speeds, it's kind of like an LFO. That's almost doing like filter modulation. On this, you can modulate everything. It's gonna sound pretty cool. You can modulate the warp. You can modulate, obviously, the drift, the position. That's classic. If you want something more jarring, you could modulate the actual wavetable. Now, let's try to design some sounds, and I'm gonna strictly stay in weird territory, and we're gonna use random here. That could be fun. And let's do it on the position. Let's make sure we have this envelope turned up. Cool. We can mess with this amp envelope, have it fade in little like a pad, do something similar with the filter. Let's turn this filter back on, add some resonance. You can try other parameters as well. We can do the drift, turn up the amount. Maybe we'll set the drift to the midpoint. Can get a lot of weird sounds that way. And there you have it. Those were the remaining synths on the OPXY. To recap, Hardsync, not my favorite. Good for simple sounds, not too much sound design potential, but it is what it is. Organ, phenomenal for organ sounds. You get the 8 different organ types. Also great to make the organ bass sounds. You can definitely do pads, leads, stuff like that if you'd like. That wouldn't be my go-to. I would use organ to honestly make organ sound. That's what it's for. That's what it does best, but you can always experiment. Prism, one of my favorites. Prism is a lot of fun to use. It's a lot of fun to automate the ratio using the LFO. You could get some nice evolving sounds that way. Also fun to automate the shape. Simple, very simple, kind of like Hardsync. I think it has some more useful parameters, like the stereo width is nice, but it's really just a sawtooth or a square with some pulse modulation. Not a lot of exciting stuff going on. The wavetable, on the other hand, I think you could spend hours, days, weeks tweaking tweaking and messing around with the drift parameter, because you can get a lot of really cool sounds with it. I hope that was helpful. If you enjoyed the video, definitely like, subscribe, and leave a comment if I missed anything or if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.